All right, thank you all so much for showing up nice and early in the AM. Yes, my name is Ben Stewart, and I'm really honored to be a part of this panel. It's very near and dear to my heart. I'm not going to go on too much. I just want to say that it's really a pleasure to be here with the three of you. Very excited about this. Ayahuasca was something for me that it changed the way that I looked at myself and my own thought processes in a way that nothing else had done before, not meditation, not my movement practices. So this is an honor for me. So thank you all for showing up. And what I want to do is, before I hand it over, I'm going to go down the line and just speak a little bit, introduce the people we have up here for the panel a little bit, and then afterwards we're going to have, we're going to try and form just one line and have questions ready and a challenge for you guys. Question will be one sentence with a question mark at the end. That's what we have time for. I think it was James Fadiman that said that very, very succinctly. So that should be a good challenge. Try and put it into one very succinct question. That way we can get through several questions at the end. So I'm going to start first with Sitaramaya Sita. Am I saying that? Huh? Sitaramaya Sita. Sita is good. Okay, so Sita is a plant wisdom practitioner trained in the Shipibo tradition, which was the first tradition I was introduced to. Having an early life challenge with addiction, she shares her wisdom from these depths, which is really important to understand the depths when you're actually sharing this wisdom. And she shares her wisdom with LA and global-based groups of healers, seekers, visionaries, and creators. She founded so many organizations that it wouldn't be right to fit it all into one little introduction, but what I felt touched me the most about what I was reading about Sita is that 13 years of abstinence from alcohol and also quite a strict diet before your first ayahuasca ceremony. If any of you are familiar with typical dieta nowadays, you'll hear about 1 week or 2 weeks before a ceremony. 13 years, that's quite an accomplishment. And for me, I have a hard enough time with intermittent fasting and fasting for 2 days, that is. So I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I'll let you plug anything else, but plantteacher.com that's a great website. Definitely check that out. Next down the line, we have Dr. Joe Tafur. And first, before I get into it, I just want to say that in the show Psychedelica on Gaia, I had the privilege of bringing Dr. Joe Tafur to Boulder, Colorado to film, to put him into the documentary series. The thing that I liked most about it was he called me beforehand and he had several questions for me. How was I going to treat the material? Am I going to be including any of the history, the shamanic history of it? What about cultural appropriation? He had several questions for me just to make sure that I was going to handle the material in a way that he approved of. He wasn't just saying, hey, let me get my name out there. And I found that very respectable. So thank you very much for that. So without further ado, for the last decade, family physician Dr. Joe Tafur has sought the role of spiritual healing in modern healthcare. He wrote an excellent book that I suggest all of you pick up. It's called The Fellowship of the River, and it highlights, among many things, his time studying under Master Ayahuasquero Ricardo Amarengo. And he also brings this wisdom into modern practices of healthcare today. So thank you for what you're doing, Joe.
Thank you.
On down the line, we have Rachael Harris. Dr. Rachael Harris has a PhD in psychology, who authored the book Lessening to Ayahuasca, another book that you should pick up before or after Fellowship of the River and visiting plantteacher.com. Before? That's a good man. So for 35 years, she was in a private practice for psycho-spiritual development. But my favorite thing that I've learned about Dr. Rachael Harris is her work with structural integration with Dr. Ida Rolf. The Dance Academy, the journal...
American Dance Therapy Association.
American Dance Therapy Association. And the reason why...
Irrelevant.
Was that?
Nothing.
The reason why that's so special to me is because for the past 3 years, I dealt with a really serious illness a few years back, and I was a gym rat before that. And after what happened was I wasn't able to look at my body or use my body in the same way. It was much more of a freeing experience. So movement training was something very, very big to me in a spiritual awakening. So these are just things that I found to be very beautiful about these three panelists up here. So I'd like for everyone to give a round of applause for everybody up here. And I'm going to set my timer on my phone. That's all I'm doing up here. I'm not sending texts. So we'll start with Sita.
Well, thank you, Ben. How's the audio on that? So, lovely intros. Thank you. And just to note, it's plant teachers, plural. There's no materials really out there, but visit the site. It's an organization dedicated to cultivating entheogenic awareness. So I'd like to start by thanking Brad, thanking UCLA, thanking all of you, thanking you, Ben, and Joe, and Rachel, thanking Ayahuasca, the Shipibo people, and the plant and tree elders. So thank you. And I want to start by stating that my reference point and my perspective is, as from a shamanic spiritual healing perspective, drinking ayahuasca and working with ayahuasca as a shamanic spiritual healing endeavor. And, I hold a couple of intentions. This talk is before, during, and after. And so I'm actually going to share some of what I share, when I talk to people individually. And it really does come from my heart. I had something else slightly different prepared, but on the ride over here this morning with Rachel, I did a little rework in the car. And so, I do hold an intention and hope that what I'm able to share with each of you today helps to ensure the safe passage of you as a participant should you drink ayahuasca. And the other intention is for the safe passage of the plants. So as of this moment, we're talking about ayahuasca, we're talking about other substances that, aren't legal, right? We're not advertising these things on a billboard, but yet here we are at UCLA. So to have presence and consciousness and awareness of how do we hold these substances and these plants, and in particular ayahuasca, safe until such time that we can offer it and share it in a society where it isn't illegal. And so, how many people here have not drank ayahuasca? Okay. So I'd like to just touch a little bit. There's some poster information in the back of the room that I invite everybody to review if you're inclined. But ayahuasca is a combination of two plants, the ayahuasca vine, Banisteriopsis capi, and chacruna, Psychotria viridis, and the Banisteriopsis contains alkaloids that act as a reversible inhibitor of monoamine oxidase. And the leaf, the Psychotria, the chacruna, contains an N-dimethyltryptamine, more commonly referred to as DMT. And, without the vine would not be orally active. But because the DMT is not being neutralized by the monoamine oxidase in our gut, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and produces what in allopathic medicine or in the north would be referred to as a psychoactive or a psychotropic effect. But from the shamanic spiritual healing perspective, it's much more than that. It is that, and it's much more than that. It is the effect of a shift in our perception, a shift in our perspective, our consciousness, our awareness, our capacity to experience ourself, the world around us, our loved ones, people in our lives, our biographical information in a very different way. And typically in a way that we don't experience it in our day-to-day waking consciousness. So how do we approach this? How do we approach the potential for this experience? Well, in the Shipibo lineage and in the practice that I'm familiar with, there is a preparation period, and Ben touched on this concept of dieta. And from my perspective, there's 4 primary parts to the experience: the preparation, the intention, the participation in the experience, and the integration that can come afterwards. With the integration piece being what can make the difference between having a powerful peak experience and having a powerful peak experience with lasting benefits, with lasting results, with shifts in our life, with shifts, that maybe open us to greater peace, joy, contentment, some of the things that were touched on this morning when we heard about these end-of-life mystical experiences. And so the preparation, from my perspective, is a really key part, because it's the preparation and the intention that directly relates to the integration afterwards. And to touch on the dieta preparation, there is the abstinence from salt, sugar, spices, dairy, red meat, pork, drugs, pharmaceuticals, alcohol, sex, masturbation. And why do we do this? Well, from my view, this period of preparation is a period of cleaning and clearing and linking our intentions. How do we start to let go of our habituated patterns? And maybe we have an intention that we want to heal something physical, or we want to heal a way of thinking, or we want to heal an addictive pattern, whether it's an addiction to a substance or to a way of behaving. And so in this period of time, oftentimes it's a week in advance if we're working in North America in certain settings. Maybe, we're day 2, day 3, like it's going good, and then we reach for the salt, and we're like, oh, but wait, the salt's not on this diet, this particular diet. And we think, oh, I'm so glad I remembered. Or is it, wow, I really want that salt. But what do we really want? And what is our intention? And why are we saying, okay, I really want the salt, and I'm going to look a little deeper at what I really want in connection and in concert with our intentions for coming to the experience. And so this is one way. This is one way. And I encourage anybody who is drinking ayahuasca or seeking to drink ayahuasca, whether it be in North America or Brazil or Peru, to really check in. Like, what feels like a fit for you? Maybe this what I'm describing feels like a fit. Maybe it doesn't. There are lots of practices that we can come to, and I offer a bit of guidance, and that is to not mistake the practitioner for the plants. Just because somebody's pouring doesn't mean you have to drink, and to know that when the right situation is ready to emerge for you personally, individually, that it'll be there, to have that trust, have that faith. So back to the preparation, and we're also holding an intention. The intention, what do I want to have happen? What do I want to manifest in my life? Maybe I want more joy. I want to feel at peace. I don't want my heart to feel heavy anymore. And attendant with that, what we want to manifest is what needs to be released for that to happen. We talk about having blocks, and there can be blocks, and those blocks could be our very thinking, or it could be a childhood trauma that has not been processed and healed. So just like if we were to go to a medical doctor or to a psychotherapist or to any other person in a healing modality, we go because okay, there's something going on and I want help with it, right? I have a rash on my leg. I, find myself caught in perseverative thinking. So we go this is the presenting situation that we want to resolve. So then we come to the ceremonial experience itself. And in the ceremonial experience, in the shamanic spiritual healing experience, there's a great opportunity. And the opportunity is to partner with the medicine, to connect with this spirit of ayahuasca. And we can ask questions like, show me what I need to do. Let me be open to receive this healing, this transformation. And how do I partner with the medicine such that it shows me the medicine within myself? And that leads to the integration. Oh, right. You know, we heard this morning, love, it's about love. Okay, so then how do I express love? How do I open to receive more love after this ceremony is over? You know, or whatever that message is. And then, you know, in a shamanic practice, there's also the shaman or the practitioner who has trained to be able to, you know, in the Shipibo tradition, sing. Right? And that is a channeling of the medicine and their prayers for the well-being of the participants, their prayers for the healing. And they're operating at a vibrational level. And that medicine is coming through, and I believe, to meet the participants' desires and call, an inherent knowing of what they need for their health, for their, you know, cleaning, clearing, alignment, fortification, transformation, and expansion. And we take this home with us from this ceremony into our lives, into our day-to-day. And how do we do this? Well, I'm going to suggest an ayahuasca retreat weekend, for example, is not 2 nights. It's a week of preparing. It's participating over the course of the weekend. It's the days afterwards. And creating space, maybe by writing, by painting, by drawing. Rachel will talk about how psychotherapy can help in the integrative process. And it's a process. And sometimes we go and we have an experience over the course of a weekend or a night or a retreat to Peru. And that's good. And we have so much content. There's so much possibility in that to work with, and we can mine it for days, weeks, months. And then for other people, they're like, wow, this is really helping me. And it's a process. And maybe they come back and have more ceremonies and continue to work. But I suggest that the power and capacity of this medicine is multifaceted and can make so much available to us if we really look for it. And for me, I'll share something about my personal experience, and that is, even today, I can think back and things will come to me from ceremonies that I had 10 years ago, and I'll be like, oh, that's what that vision was about. And it's just this matter of staying open and available to the messages, to the ineffable, to the things that we can't name, but we feel and know. And I believe that ayahuasca can help us do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That was very beautiful sharing. And it's really nice to open up the dialogue on before, during, and after ceremony, because what I gather from what you're saying is that really it's a glimpse or a window into living in a different way, living with a different respect towards food, things that we're doing every single day that add up. So it's really nice to hear that from somebody. Thank you so much for exploring a little bit about the time and the preparation and how important it is going into a ceremony rather than just like plowing into it thinking that we've been there before. Because if you haven't been there before, you really haven't been there before. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Joe Tafur. And yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, LAPSS. Thank you, everyone. Sita, Rachel, Ben. I'm a little bit sick, sorry. I just got back from Peru on Wednesday, so I'm coming from that tradition and that world. And so I want to just kind of continue with what Sita's talking about because, you know, I'm very interested in the science and this whole mystical experience discussion that's kind of been a theme, you know, so far. Keeps coming up, and it's what everyone keeps pointing to. And scientists that can now start talking about it, you know, it's like it's there, oh, it's there again, there it is. This is what's going on, and this idea that, you know, there's this mystical criteria, this unity, noetic quality, sacredness, positive mood, ineffable, paradoxical, transcendence. And that's like secular criteria, right, that we can talk about and publish in a scientific paper and everyone can agree, or the Brooklyn atheists can agree that, oh, they lost sense of time and space, so I can say that out loud. It's not against their atheist religion, you know. There's like this fundamentalism that people seem to struggle with so much, and that the other guy was talking about from Imperial College, you know, with the Lego, the fixedness. like, oh, I can't say that. Oh, I can't say that. And this reality that we are living in a mystery, you know, and it's just a matter of honesty to talk about that. And I understand why in science we want to, you know, talk about proven facts and evidence-based things, but still in our real lives, you know, there is mystery, there's no running from it. And so when we go to this portal, we were talking last night, and it's like, okay, so here's this portal of the mystical experience, that when people have this mystical experience, that's the one that brings the change. You know, and so then we, you know, in a scientific paper, we're allowed to publish a few quotes. Oh, they said this, you know, cosmic love, they said that. Like, that's what allowed them to transform and to get over it. And then, you know, within a shamanic context, and I don't know if this, I'm just going off what I want to talk about. It's down there, you know, we do, you know, I was just at New Erao, which is the center that I've been a part of, and we work with people in ayahuasca over a period of time. You know, so it's we just did a 10-day group. Some people are here from the 10-day group. And when you're working with ayahuasca in that way, there's the diet that Sita described, and there's preparation, there's follow-up, and there's all that stuff. But there's also the ceremonies and what goes on in those ceremonies. So that mystical experience period of time, that mystery time where it's like, oh yeah, they had a mystical experience, and that's why they're better. What happened during that time is crucial to their experience. And everybody that's had a mystical experience, something really amazing happened during that. And a lot of times something very personal happened during that. And a lot of times in the case of the kind of work that we do with ayahuasca, and then this was, you know, I heard a little bit about Maria Sabina, and she was talking about how, you know, the mushrooms, they're guiding them into this world where everything has already happened, you know, where we understand everything. And so now we work in a relationship with a guide, you know, with nature. We work with a guide with nature. We're not just like, okay, anybody can take this and it just happens. It's like, no. There's like a relationship that you develop over time that allows you to access more. And relationship is beyond intellectualization. You know, I think that's just a fact when people relate to each other and their loved ones and their families. And so it's like, again, we just have to admit that as well. You know, we're here talking science, but then somebody has to deal with their wife or they have to deal with their child. And the intellectualization falls short. So they turn to relationship and the realities of relationship that are through the heart and through the feeling and through those realities of heart and soul. And so my friend Daryl, he's a Navajo medicine man, and he always says, you know, spirits first. Spirits first, then our feeling, our emotion is in response to that. And then our mind reflects on that. And then, you know, our actions come from that. And so our goal there is to help people work through issues of the heart to open access to the spirit. And there's a way to do that. And for us, it's about this relationship and walking people into this relationship. It's not just about the medication or the substance or the plant doing it for the person. It's also them. You know, when you approach something with humility and love and open-mindedness, I imagine that has some effect on your default mode network. You know, that's probably, yes, that would make sense. That you have the capacity as a human being in your spiritual practice to open your mind and to open your heart. And so in relating to a plant spirit, you know, as strange as that might sound, and we have this wild title, Listening to Ayahuasca, it's so important. And you can get so much further. And this is me speaking from, I'm a medical doctor, and from hundreds of, you know, ceremonies down there with thousands of people, this is the process where they get more progress. This is how they get further in the process, is learning, teaching them how to relate to ayahuasca, how to approach it spiritually, how to approach it humbly and respectfully, opening their mind, you know, and that opens this access to this connection. Because we're saying, okay, there's more connectedness. Oh, okay, everyone's more connected. The mystical experience, everyone's more, what are they connected to? What does that feel like, you know? And being able to talk about that feeling and that experience, you know, in this kind of setting. Because that's what it is. That's the nature of what this, you know, it seems that a lot of this psychedelic medicine research is opening the door, and that's my impression, to kind of reawaken the role of spiritual healing in modern healthcare. You know, how important it is to take care of the heart and soul and deal with people at that level, the emotional and spiritual dimension of illness, and the way they can be transformed that way. But that's a process that involves a spiritual awareness and a spiritual approach. And so for us, it's really important we go through this process of learning to relate to the plant spirits. It's as crazy as that sounds. And again, I was at some conference in Australia, and we had the materialists versus the immaterialists. There's whatever, arguing, I'm right, you're wrong. That was the big argument. And they were trying to use materialist approaches and materialist criteria to evaluate a mystical experience. It's like if somebody is telling you that, hey, you meditate for 20 years in this fashion in a cave, and this might happen to you, well, you kind of have to meditate in a cave for 20 years to learn exactly what they're talking about. And the same is true with the plant spirits and the plant medicine and the traditional Amazonian plant medicine. And we have that happen regularly at the center. People coming from all parts of the world, they're coming, and then you walk them through this process, and I would say a very high percentage of them walk away saying, wow, I had an interaction with the plant spirit. This guiding plant spirit took me into this other world, as Maria Sabina talked about, where everything has already happened, where I can understand, where this cosmic love is accessible, where I can understand, beyond the limitations of my mind, but I can experience it. What is spiritual for me, it's those things that I experience beyond my mind's understanding, but I still experience them, And I don't have to deny that to myself, that I have that experience that sometimes my mind doesn't understand. And that's crucial in the shamanic process. So then we're developing that kind of connection, and then that's the connection from which the Icaros and the singing, just to kind of add to this mix of as we bridge the worlds of clinical psychedelic medicine and things like, Shipibo Icaros. Like, in other words, playing a CD is not the same as engaging in the energy in the moment as it is right now, because that's relationship. That's relationship between me and myself, relationship between me and the plant, relationship between me and this moment, and relationship between me and this person and the other people. And there's an energy there. There's an energy that's there, that's part of our capacity as human beings. And that's what shamanism is about, and that's what this tradition is about, that's given rise to these psychedelic practices that we're doing now, that we're learning. And it's amazing what's possible with psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. I'm so impressed and pleased, and it's helping so many people. And I love to have more exchange between the traditional approach, because I think there's a whole other realm. It's like, okay, take it once or take it twice, or versus going through like an extended period of treatment and seeing what's possible. So I just wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about relationship, that the relationship with the plant spirit, with the ayahuasca, before, during, after, is a big part of how we practice. And it's a big part of how we achieve breakthroughs with people. And we ask them to open their minds to not worry about, I don't know if I really believe that. I don't know, is that real? It's like, well, we don't know about any of it. We don't know anything that's real. Well, you believe whatever you want to believe, at some point. And so now, let yourself be. Let yourself be. Let the plant spirit help you be. And then that opens many, many things. And so I just wanted to add that part. Thank you.
That's it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. That was really good.
Rachel is the best.
I already began to complain to him, how can I follow that? We fight all the time.
We don't.
No.
Yeah, in a great way. That's relationships, apparently.
Yes.
The only thing I wanted to say on that was what was coming up for me when you were saying that was, in a sense, getting out of our own way, not having to feel the need to prove or to completely know, but relationships are about building that bridge to understanding. Because I have a wife and a daughter, and we have twins on the way. And I can't say that I understand any of them fully, but what I can do is get out of my own way and love as much as possible. So it seems that you were saying the materialist and the immaterialist. There's this fine line between skepticism and cynicism, or open-mindedness and gullibility. And skepticism is really healthy. Open-mindedness is really healthy. But really these just seem like ways to dismantle those things of ourselves that get in the way of just opening a capacity. And that capacity could be for love, for knowledge, for truth, whatever it might be. But that's what was coming up for me in that was something very beautiful that the plants had taught me, and also that I just was able to put into words, thanks to you, was basically being able to step out of our own way to be able to come into a proper relationship with the plants and with the people around us. Because what are we doing all this for? It should be for something greater. It should be for bringing goodness and orchestrating goodness in this world. So with that, I want to hand it over to Dr. Rachael Harris, and thank you very much for all of your work.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad, and all the volunteers. I'm really pleased to be here. And let me start with the ending in a way, and that is the one thing I would want you to take with you from this panel is each of us talking about our relationship with the plant spirit. And trust me, I have no explanation for this. I can hardly believe it or accept it myself. But I want you to know that we really embody that, each of us in our own way. And my way is a little different, as I'm spent most of my life as a psychotherapist and a decade or so as a researcher. And so listening to ayahuasca was based on some original research I did, and with the advice from a very intuitive shaman, I asked the question, are you in an ongoing relationship with the spirit of ayahuasca? And much to my horror, shock, and surprise, is 75% of the people said yes, they had an ongoing relationship. And they communicated with the spirit of the plant through dreams, meditation, intuitions. So there was this sense of, Sita's word was partnering with the medicine. And Joe talked about relationship with the plant teacher. And evidently this is a variable that's very important to the process of working with ayahuasca that is obviously doesn't get talked about in the research studies with psilocybin or LSD. It's a slightly different process, and I want to highlight that. But the neurological findings are really important for me as a therapist, and that is the finding that there's increased neural flexibility after a psychedelic, and that lasts for what I call the golden window. And that means there's a quieting of the default mode network, that is the neurological network that supports our ego construction. So that's the active day-to-day reinforcement of what we construct and identify with, which is a psychological way of saying what the ancient scriptures have said, is that the self is an illusion, but we constantly reinforce it every day. And it gets constructed when we're very young, in our first couple of years. That's why I think they're now talking about the first 1,000 days of life, the first 3 years of life are so important. Because what gets established there is our basic patterns around attachment and personal and love relationships. And that gets constructed very early, mostly for our own protection. So some of us have what's called a secure attachment, and so we sort of have an expectation that relationships will be beneficial and supportive and kind and loving. The other half of the population has an avoidant or an anxious attachment, where there's tends to be a little more fear and defensiveness around relationships, and that makes choices in a partner more difficult. And so these are themes that get established very early and are part of our ego construction. And this is what gets loosened up after a psychedelic experience. So you can hear me, sometimes I talk as a researcher, sometimes as a therapist. This is an amazing therapeutic opportunity where those knots in our construction get loosened and we can begin to make different decisions. So I just want to say a minute about those knots. That was actually R.D. Laing's term for when we batten down the hatches. Jung called it getting stuck in a complex. The Sufis call it getting caught in a knot, N-A-F. These are, when we dig our heels in, we get stubborn in a relationship or an argument. You're right, I'm wrong, this sort of, whenever we dig our heels in and we solidify, you can almost feel it as a tightening and a solidification and a stronger belief that, no, this is right. It gets very concrete. And the psychedelic experiences allow us to recognize better when we're caught and to loosen that up. We have such a sort of model of experience of letting go of that identification with our construct that we get, with practice, we get better at loosening up. And there was one presentation yesterday that talked about the relationship between psychedelics and meditation, is that people get that, they improve their capacity to self-reflect and to catch those moments when we get stuck. And when the veterans yesterday were talking about, yes, they were actually talking about ayahuasca. Ayahuasca has helped, but there's daily work after that goes on. And it is that catching ourselves when we're stuck and super identified with something. And that usually means we've got our defenses up and we're protecting ourselves. So underneath that is fear. And there was a great book many years ago about children, terminally ill children. The title of the book said everything you need to know. Love is letting go of fear. That it's not, the opposites are not love-hate, it's love-fear. And so when we become afraid, we cling to our ego construction in a way that solidifies us, our personality, and we lose touch with who we really are as a spiritual being. So those moments, that days, weeks, are prime times for doing self-reflective work. And I want to say there's a lot of talk now about integration. Ongoing psychotherapy is different from integration. And I'm really turning my interest toward the dual processes, because people don't usually just do one ayahuasca ceremony. People are often involved over time. And psychotherapy occurs over time. So here you have these two containers and two processes that are going on where there can be plenty of movement back and forth between these two processes. In other words, the psychotherapy can inform and expand the ceremony experience, and the ceremony can expand and inform the psychotherapy process. And this is a really valuable opportunity. And I think, there's always, the famous quote, 1 night of ayahuasca is worth 10 years of psychotherapy. Despite the fact that I've devoted my life to being a therapist, I do want to say there is real value in having these two containers in an ongoing way so that things unfold over time. And I just have to say personally, after lots of years, I'm either in the therapist chair or the client's chair, it's sort of all I've done. There have been ayahuasca ceremonies that sent me running to a therapist. And I just want to say that these are two separate processes, and I saw them as beautifully merged and working together. And I still reflect, and what comes up is always going to be a core issue. And so this is an ongoing process for me. And how am I on time?
Yeah, you have several minutes.
Several minutes, I've no idea.
We're only at 8 minutes now.
Okay, all right. I want to just say, well, even, Ben mentioned his phrase was "get out of my own way," which is, I think, a colloquial way of having that objectivity to be able to have a choice about, do I want to stay stuck in my position? That old thing, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? It's that kind of thing, is to kind of budge you out of the construct. But I want to talk about the opposite, which has been written, here's the psychological jargon, a non-egocentric understanding of the world, a prioritization of other people over self-focus, a value emphasizing universalism and benevolence, an expanding concern beyond the self for close others, caretakers, one community, and one's existence in general. That's the perspective that's the opposite of being stuck in our personality. So I wanted you to have a vision of what the other looks like and feels like. It's that capacity to have a bigger perspective, not just what's best for me or what I want, even if it's not best for me, but a perspective that's grander, what's best for all of us. And there is actually psychological research on humility, because this is one of the things to look for if you choose someone to work with in an ayahuasca ceremony, is that quality of humbleness. And hopefully this is part of what gets developed in relationship to the plant spirit. So here's the psychological take on what we mean by humility. A secure acceptance of self-concept that is not hypersensitive to ego threats. So it's not like I want to ditch my personality, because then, you can pretty much lock me up. But it's that I want to accept the ego that I've constructed and have compassion for myself and not be stuck in it. So not be hypersensitive, not have my amygdala triggered all the time to personal ego threats. To perceive, this is people who are humble, to perceive themselves and others clearly without the need to exaggerate information in either a self-enhancing or self-debasing direction. Either way can be tricky. An openness to discovering new insights about themselves and the world. And you can see in the big 5 personality factors that openness is key, and that is, psychologists didn't believe these personality variables change through life. And so the research is showing that openness increases after psychedelics. And it's that sense of being open, learning new things, and that's a kind of flexibility of that ego structure. A lack of self-focus and increased awareness of and appreciation for others, and more egalitarian. So there's this great sense of the love that Dr. Bosis was talking about, of manifesting that more in our daily lives. And that is pretty much the opposite of doubling down on our ego construct. And so at the grossest level, psychotherapy is that process of catching ourselves when we're stuck in our ego. And the ayahuasca ceremonies offer us a vacation sometimes from our ego, an annihilation of our ego. It's not always fun and games. But the lived experience of identifying with who we really are, with the spirit, as Joe was saying, rather than the psychological ego construct. And then psychotherapy is how do we manifest that in the world? And so what's difficult when we talk about either of these processes, because they're very nonverbal and artistic processes, both ceremonies and psychotherapy, we really have to rely on our own intuitive capacity, our own inner sense of discernment. And I've really struggled with what is discernment? How do I know who to work with, what ceremony to go to, what therapist, what's right, what's my next step, how even to set my intention. So here's my best definition of discernment that I want to share. Listen to the message that leads to the love that permeates the universe. And that's the guiding spirit for me. So thank you.
That was really nice. Thank you. One thing that was really coming up for me with that was it was really beautiful how each of you, before, during, and after ceremony. One thing that over the years became more important to me after ceremony was really taking that time and finding how do I personally integrate this experience, because we might all have different ways of integrating insights that we have, whatever they may come from. And when I was listening to you, I really felt that it's important for us to realize that, let's just say, I had this one experience, well, many of them felt like death experiences, but the greatest thing that I got from ayahuasca was actually 6 months after one of my ceremonies. And it was the softest, gentlest moment. It wasn't like a deep, deep, divine awakening. It was just this gentle realization that what we have here is a glimpse of life. It's just a glimpse. And we can say we know what might happen afterwards or not, but it really is just a glimpse. And so acknowledging that in that moment I was dealing with a lot of stress and how I was going to make things work financially and yada yada, family, travel, all that stuff. And I came to realize that all of these struggles that I was calling my own, and all these things that, woe is me, Velcro taped to forehead, all of that is really could be turned around. And in that moment, I decided, being a creator, being an artist, I decided to turn that around and just acknowledge that all of that uncomfortability, all of the unpleasantries that might come along with life can be seen as I have the privilege of being able to hold a little bit of this unpleasantness, this uncomfortability, while so much more is happening out in the world. And again, being able to acknowledge that the best thing that I could possibly do in this life is bring more love into the family and friends and the people around me. And that comes with a form of self-love and a humbling of myself, and acknowledging that everyone's going to experience pain and suffering and trials and tribulations in their own way. But what can we give? What can we learn? What kind of an example can we give by how we hold that? How we reflect that back outwards to our community. So I just want to say it's beautiful to listen to you three, very much so. I'm honored to be here. And what I want to do is be able to give it up to any of you who might have some questions for our panelists. So if you have any questions, maybe form a line, and we can get this show on the road.
I'd like to ask the first question. Step over here. So as some of you know, Dennis McKenna, Charles Grove, and I did a small pilot study in Peru, and one of the findings was that there was a trend towards a lessening of the fear of death. Can you guys address that? I mean, have you found that also in your various practices?
Lessening of the fear of death.
You guys.
I'll say something short. Okay. That's a good question, and that's been touched on this morning with the psilocybin, and I think that a lessening of the fear of death is really what I hear from participants is a lessening of the fear of death because there's more of an embracing of this life, right, and a willingness to engage with our own lives. I know for myself personally, I had about 2 years in Peru where I was just like, why do I keep doing this? Because every time I do it, I die, and it feels awful. And then I transcended that, and then I'm like, like that quote above the old Christian monastery. I love it, right? Like we die, if we die before we die, then we don't have to die when we die. So like that releasing into death so that we can live. And I do believe that ayahuasca can help facilitate those experiences, open the door to those experiences. We still have to, as individuals, surrender to it, right? We have to be willing to have that kind of experience. But I do believe that ayahuasca, like many of the other medicines, can facilitate the death. And the death really, it's the death of the ego. When the ego dies, then we realize, that was just a big attachment.
Yeah, I agree with Sita. I mean, I think it's just all kinds of spiritual practices breed that kind of feeling. I think a lot of Tibetan Buddhists are all about that, transcending death in the Bardo states, and my own family and their Catholicism, preparing for death, welcoming death, welcoming the opportunity to meet spirit and eternity. And I think many religious or spiritual people believe that, and ayahuasca is something that sometimes facilitates that for people, to get them to that kind of spiritual consciousness where they transcend their ego and they're kind of over it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to add, based on years of interviewing people, is that ayahuasca sort of opens up a portal to the land of the dead. And people often report having a conversation with somebody who's dead and passed over. And it allows them to rework a relationship sometimes, but certainly changes their philosophy and how they view their own lives, and is very consoling around their own perception of their own death. So that's very specific to what happens with ayahuasca.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
What concerns and/or experience would you have for someone that was exposed to ayahuasca and psychedelics while they're in their mother's womb?
Well, I mean, that's kind of, it's an unknown, area. So I could say in the Shipibo tradition where and you think about Brazil and the Brazilian churches where people do drink ayahuasca when pregnant, it's not uncommon. They say in the Shipibo tradition that they avoid it in the 3rd trimester because it could bring on premature labor. But it's not like a rampant practice, I wouldn't say, in my experience. I did run into somebody here from the LA scene who was like all about trying to drink ayahuasca when she was pregnant and was really interested in drinking ayahuasca when she's pregnant. And I was like, why do you want to do that? With no cultural background, with no reason. And it was just a trendy thing. She wanted to have an Aya baby, and that's what they were talking about. And so I don't know, for me, I think it's a big question mark. Like, it's a very personal decision that we don't have a lot of research, there's not a lot of science to relate to people around this topic. So I think it's a very touchy, delicate topic. Like me as a medical doctor, I would not advise around that. And I think it's a bigger question of like, why do people want to do that? That's my big question. And in the case of some of these shamans, they're doing it because they work as a shaman and they drink, when they're pregnant sometimes because they're working. Other people, it's part of their religion, it's part of their practice, and so that's part of their life, and some people believe that they get connected that way to the plant spirits, Again, I don't have a lot of personal experience with that, so it's hard for me to say too much about it.
Can I say something? Or if you would like to.
Just 2 quick things on that. What Joe was speaking to is intentionality, and I think so much is dependent. That question, why? Like, what is the intention? I know 2 women. One who had 3 daughters, and she was a member of the Santo Daime, and she was a mapia in Acre, and that's what they did, right? So like that makes sense contextually and cosmologically and culturally. And another woman who very, very steeped in the medicine and felt this really strong call and, took a very small amount because she felt like this is what ayahuasca was inviting her to do. But beyond that, we don't have a lot of information to go on. I think probably if you're really interested, the place to make the inquiry is really with the Santo Daime or the União de Vegetal, because they have the most experience of people living in community, in communal settings that are having babies and, in their day-to-day life while drinking regularly, as much as, once a week or more.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. So my wife found out that we were having our first child right after an ayahuasca ceremony in the first trimester. So she'd done it 3 times. And then during the second trimester, she had a very small amount as well because she was constantly making food for ceremony out in Holland, actually. And I'm a little biased, but I can say that my daughter is amazing, very tapped in, very intelligent. She's gorgeous, comes from a great family line. So she's got all that going for her. But I mean, I would say that she's really tuned in, very intelligent. And I wouldn't say that my wife was doing a ton of ayahuasca during that time. She definitely put on the brakes once she found out she was pregnant. But as much as she did it, I don't believe there was any ill effects from it. But then that's also not advice or any encouragement to try it. That was something that just happened.
Hey, I want to thank you guys. This was a great panel. I really enjoyed it. I just had a really quick and broad question. We heard a bit about your guys' past, and I'm just curious about your futures. If you guys want to take that at whatever.
What's your future?
Yeah, like
Dun, da, da, da.
It's extremely broad in that sense, but I mean, do you have any prospective projects going on or things that you're moving towards, or even just a personal thing, you know, that you're working towards a particular integration or something? So, thank you.
Okay. For me, I'm finishing up training as a somatic experiencing trauma release therapist, and what I see on the horizon is more interdisciplinary work with ayahuasca, with the shamanic spiritual practice, and bringing in, you know, naturopathic medicine, you know, allopathic medicine, various forms of therapy, and having an understanding of this integration process. Like, I think we're just starting to figure that out a little bit, but really moving in the direction of a multidisciplinary approach and bringing in the arts, music, visual art, and in concert with medicine, and how we, from different disciplines and practices, can support each other and support clients, participants, patients in their healing.
I'm trying to relax and take it easy and stop being like overdriven. It's number one. Number two, we have the Modern Spirit is a nonprofit organization dedicated to demonstrating the value of spiritual healing in modern healthcare. And so we've now partnered with USC and MAPS for the MDMA PTSD trial to collect saliva samples to look for evidence of epigenetic changes in this PTSD healing that people are experiencing with the MAPS trial. So that's like a physiological, trying to demonstrate some of the physiology that may shift in response to so-called mystical experiences, you know, where the rubber hits the road. So I'm very interested in that. But that's a little side project. I'm still taking people down to Peru and to Costa Rica and different places and exploring legal possibilities for ayahuasca, you know, within the USA. Those are the major projects. Maybe do some doctor work, possibly.
I did the research and I wrote the book as a mission after some ceremonies. And Jung has a quote that you rise up to meet your destiny. And I have often felt like a good foot soldier with this work, and I continue to. In my own personal life, I'll do a little more writing, and Monday I'll fly back to my island in Maine, where I'm hoping to get the mice out of the cabin.
What about you, Ben?
The future for me?
Yes.
I want a big piece of land with water running through it, fruit trees all around, organic garden, people I can teach movement, laughter, teach about foraging, and really have a school system and an educational system that focuses on critical thinking and being able to live wisely in community. To make that happen, I'm going to make films, and you might see me on the corner peddling shoemaking and various other things that I like to do for fun. But really all in the one goal of I want to start a school.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here. My question is on dieta, and I think Sita touched upon it a little bit, but there's a lot of varying information on how to follow it, what's actually physically dangerous for you, and why you shouldn't consume certain things. So I'm actually curious to hear from, especially a medical professional, is it more of a intentional and sort of like is it for the mind, or is it actually for the body, or, just your thoughts on that?
Is it body odor? Is that what you said? Body?
Mind or body.
Mind or body. Yeah, I think that, typical the Western approach, they've kind of said, oh, the diet is for this, the diet is for the biochemistry, the diet is for this, oh, they figured it out, the tyramines, and people are very focused on that and concerned about that. I don't believe that the tradition is doing the diet for those reasons. I think the diet is a period of purification. It's a period of, and it's very different, so again, it's more like, I tell people like martial arts, there's different schools. So again, we're moving into an organic realm, so there is no standard practice, and so it's more about an individual, a teacher that you work with, and following that and seeing what you get out of that, just like jujitsu or something like that, where everyone's going to have their own way, and they allow for that, so it's organic. And so in our case, Ricardo is, he's pretty strict about the diet, and the idea is that it opens you spiritually, and it's a form of sacrifice as well, that it is a malnourishment. It's not like a super nutrition. It's not considered healthy. People lose a lot of weight, and people who do long-term diets, they look ill. That's part of it. And the idea is that you go through that sacrifice in an effort to open yourself spiritually to receive the medicine of the plants. So as, again, mysterious, strange, but, the people that try it, many of them, achieve something with that practice.
And there's like a disengagement from the physical, and which opens us up to the spiritual, because physically, we're depleted of iron, we're depleted of these things that keep us, held to the earth, and we are able to go more to the spirit. And what I'll say is, like, tyramine-rich foods and dairy, like, if you go to the jungles, like, it's not like they had cows running around or things that they were getting milk products from in the first place, or they weren't storing or fermenting food other than, maybe the alcoholic beverage. So, like, what we're interpreting here, I find particularly interesting, because we're duplicating it from the scientific perspective, saying, okay, if there's a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, then we have to restrict these things. And, there's debate about that because it's a reversible inhibitor, and I'm not going to go into the science, but what we see, the restrictions are with MAOIs in the diet, are just naturally how the diet was in the jungle, because they didn't have those things. It wasn't even an issue. But if you are drinking in North America and preparing for ayahuasca, there are certain things to restrict that are now on the radar screen or possibly being taken from a health perspective. And then there's, dieta in preparation or in concert with ayahuasca, but then there's also the practice of dieta with master plants, because the Amazon is a very rich pharmacopoeia, and there are teacher plants and medicinal plants, and it gets very complex. So, like Joe said, there's not a book or one way, but there are lineages and practices, and so much is dependent on the lineage and the particular arm of that practice. Even in the Shipibo cosmology and practice, depends on the maestro and the lineage and how that person has a relationship with certain plants as to what comes through and then what happens in the dieta.
Yeah. And you're getting more sensitive when you don't eat salt, and you don't eat sugar, and you don't have all these distractions to go to. A lot more of your personal issues come forward, and there's no one to talk to, and there's nowhere to run. And so, like they say, the personality and the ego, fade a little bit, and the spirit comes forward. So it's partially for that as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that's all we have time for, so let's all give it up for the panel.